The stars above New Alexandria glittered like scattered diamonds against the void, their light diffused by the colony's atmospheric shield. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the United Earth Embassy, her reflection ghostly pale against the reinforced windows. The message she'd just received from Earth Command felt heavy in her mind. Another human research vessel had vanished in Imperial space. 30 ships in 6 months. No debris. No distress signals. Just silence. The Galactic Imperial Confederation claimed ignorance, but their mandibles twitched with barely concealed satisfaction during every diplomatic exchange. They thought humans were blind to their machinations. They were wrong. Ambassador, the Imperial delegation has arrived. Marcus Webb, her chief of security, appeared at her shoulder. His posture was rigid, hand never far from his ceremonial sidearm. Both knew the weapon was useless against Imperial shield technology, but its presence was protocol. Earlier than scheduled, Sarah noted, straightening her midnight blue diplomatic uniform. They're getting bolder. The Imperial delegation swept into the embassy's grand hall like a tide of liquid metal. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught the light, refracting it in dazzling patterns across the marble floors. High Executor Vaxstar led them, his upper appendages arranged in what passed for a gesture of respect among his kind. Ambassador Chen, the executor's voice resonated through his translation matrix. We bring grave news. Sarah felt her pulse quicken but kept her expression neutral. The Empire's concern is noted, Executor. One of your research vessels has been found. Vaxstar's primary eyes fixed on her face. The stellar horizon. It appears to have suffered a catastrophic drive failure near the Centauri boundary. Lies. The stellar horizon was a state-of-the-art vessel with triple redundant drive systems. Sarah had personally attended its launch ceremony 3 months ago. We offer our deepest condolences, Vaxstar continued, his secondary arms performing the Empire's ritual gesture of mourning. All hands were lost. How fortunate that the Empire's patrols found the wreckage, Sarah replied evenly. We would appreciate access to the site for our own investigation. Regrettably, the debris field has already been cleared. A hazard to navigation, you understand. Of course. No evidence, no questions, no justice. Just like the other ships. The United Earth government thanks you for this information, Sarah said, the diplomatic phrases tasting like ash in her mouth. We would request. The explosion that ripped through the embassy's western wing cut off her words. Alarms screamed as the atmospheric shields flickered. Through the chaos, Sarah saw Vaxstar's crystalline face arrange itself into what might have been a smile. It seems your embassy's power core is malfunctioning, the executor observed calmly. How unfortunate. The Empire would be happy to provide technical assistance. Sarah's earpiece crackled to life. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled fury. Ambassador, we have multiple breaches. Armed intruders in Imperial combat armor. They're jamming our communications. This was it, then. The moment Earth intelligence had warned might come. Sarah reached for the neural transmitter disguised as a ceremonial hairpin. One press would send everything she'd gathered on Imperial activities straight to Earth Command. A gracious offer, Executor, she said, her finger finding the transmitter's activation point. But humanity has always preferred to solve its own problems. The second explosion took out the main power grid. In the strobing emergency lights, Sarah saw Imperial troops pouring through the breaches. Their weapons were definitely not ceremonial. The Empire has grown tired of this charade, Vaxstar declared, his translator abandoned in favor of his species' natural resonant frequencies. Your kind lacks the wisdom to be part of galactic society. This is a mercy. Sarah smiled then, a sharp expression that seemed to give the executor pause. You mistake patience for weakness, Executor. Humanity has survived far worse than the likes of you. The neural transmitter pulsed once against her scalp. Message sent. Evidence transmitted. Now for the hard part. Marcus, she sub-vocalized into her comm unit. Protocol Omega. Confirm. Confirmed, Ambassador. His voice was steady. It's been an honor. Sarah straightened her uniform one last time. In the distance, she could hear the embassy's defense systems engaging, buying time for the evacuation protocols. Not everyone would make it out. That had always been part of the calculation. One last thing, Executor, she said, watching Imperial troops secure the chamber's exits. Humanity has a saying, the first casualty of war is truth. The second. She pressed her palm against the biolock hidden in her sleeve. The second is mercy. The embassy's quantum core detonated in a flash of impossible light. In the last microsecond before the explosion consumed them all, Sarah saw something new in the Executor's alien features, fear. 12 hours later, Earth Command received her final transmission. Within 24 hours, humanity's response was already in motion. The Empire had wanted to make a statement by executing a human ambassador. They were about to learn that humanity could make statements of its own. Fleet Admiral Helena Reyes stood on the bridge of the EFS Nightshade, watching the holographic display of Imperial space with eyes that hadn't rested in days. The massive supercarrier, hidden in the shadow of a rogue planet, represented humanity's best-kept secret, a stealth fleet built for exactly this scenario. Final system check complete, Commander David Park announced from his station. Quantum shroud generators at full capacity. The Empire's sensors won't see us coming. Helena nodded, her silver-streaked hair catching the dim light of the bridge's combat illumination. Status of Operation Ghostfall. All teams report ready, Major Sarah Wong, head of Special Operations, replied. Strike teams are embedded across all primary targets. They're just waiting for the signal. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. While the Empire celebrated their victory at New Alexandria, believing they had cowed humanity into submission, they'd failed to notice the infiltrators already within their borders. Maintenance crews, merchant traders, even entertainment providers, all carefully placed human operatives who had spent years mapping Imperial weaknesses. The Empire thinks they know war, Helena addressed her crew, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive vessel. They think they understand violence because they've dominated lesser species for millennia. But they've never faced humanity in true combat. Today, we show them the difference between occupation and warfare. The tactical display updated, showing hundreds of red dots representing Imperial military installations, shipyards, and command centers. Each one had a human strike team in place, waiting. Commence Operation Ghostfall, Helena commanded. All teams, execute on my mark. Across Imperial space, in perfect synchronization, human operatives activated devices that had been smuggled in piece by piece over years. The Empire's mighty shields, their supposedly impenetrable defenses, meant nothing when the threat was already inside. On the Imperial throne world of Crystallos Prime, the planetary defense grid simply went dark. In the Helix shipyards, automated systems began executing phantom commands, sending half-built dreadnoughts into collision courses with each other. On 100 worlds, communication networks crashed, replaced by a single repeating message in all Imperial languages, remember New Alexandria. First wave confirmed successful, David reported, his fingers dancing across his console. Imperial response times exactly as predicted. They're scrambling to contain the chaos. Helena allowed herself a grim smile. Launch second wave. Begin phase 2. The Nightshade's engines powered up silently, its quantum shroud bending light and gravity around the massive vessel. Behind it, 50 other ships of the Ghost Fleet did the same, becoming invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. Across Imperial space, thousands of automated defense platforms suddenly targeted their own ships. Emergency protocols were overridden. Classified files began transmitting themselves to every public network, revealing centuries of Imperial atrocities against lesser species. Imperial Command is attempting to coordinate a response, Sarah reported. But with their communications compromised, they're falling back on preset protocols. Exactly as we planned. Multiple Imperial fleets converging on their capital, David added. They're abandoning their defensive positions exactly as predicted. Helena watched the tactical display update in real time, showing Imperial forces rushing to protect their core worlds. Leaving their frontier bases exposed. Leaving their supply lines vulnerable. Launch third wave, she ordered. All ships, commence attack pattern Omega. Target priority, command and control facilities. Secondary targets, power generation and shield generators. No mercy. The Ghost Fleet struck like a thunderbolt from clear skies. Imperial bases, caught with their shields down and their weapons targeting phantom enemies, never saw their destruction coming. The Nightshade's advanced weaponry, developed in secret over decades, cut through Imperial defenses like they weren't there. Multiple confirmed strikes, David reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Imperial response forces are in disarray. They can't coordinate without their command centers. Helena watched as decades of Imperial military superiority crumbled in hours. The mighty Empire, which had thought itself invincible, was learning a harsh lesson about human warfare. They had expected a frontal assault, a chance to demonstrate their superior technology and numbers. Instead, humanity had turned their own arrogance into a weapon. Message from Earth Command, Sarah announced. Phase 3 is authorized. Helena nodded, her expression hardening. Send the signal to all embedded agents. Commence Operation Daybreak. Across 1,000 Imperial worlds, sleeper agents who had spent years or decades building cover identities received their activation codes. The Empire was about to learn that humans didn't just excel at military strategy, they were masters of the long game. And send this message on all Imperial frequencies, Helena added. Let them know exactly why this is happening. The message was simple, broadcast in both human and Imperial languages. You thought killing our ambassador would break us. Instead, it united us. This is only the beginning. The Empire had started this war thinking humans were primitive barbarians who needed to be taught their place. They were about to learn that humanity had simply been waiting for an excuse to demonstrate what real warfare looked like. The Ghost Fleet moved through Imperial space like avenging spirits, untouchable and unstoppable. The age of Imperial dominance was over. The era of human ascendancy had begun. The Imperial High Command's war room on Crystallos Prime was in chaos. High Marshal Vexthor, his crystalline carapace dulled with stress, watched in horror as another sector went dark on the strategic display. Impossible, he hissed through his translator. Their technology was centuries behind ours. We monitored everything. But the evidence was undeniable. The supposedly primitive humans had deployed weapons and tactics that defied Imperial understanding. Their ships appeared and disappeared at will, immune to the Empire's most advanced detection systems. In Earth's orbital shipyards, Colonel Maya Rodriguez supervised the launch of humanity's next surprise. The phase-shift dreadnoughts, vessels that could temporarily exist in multiple-dimensional states, were about to make their combat debut. All phase-shift drives showing green, her chief engineer reported. The Empire's conventional shields will be useless against these babies. Maya watched as the massive ships, their hulls rippling with quantum distortion fields, moved into formation. These weren't just warships, they were the culmination of decades of secret research, developed by scientists who understood that humanity would eventually need to defend itself against galactic threats. Launch Operation Phantom Storm, Maya commanded. Show them what these ships can do. The phase-shift dreadnoughts slipped between dimensions, emerging deep within Imperial territory. Their first targets were the Empire's proud orbital fortresses, massive structures that had never been breached in 10,000 years of service. Until now. The phase-shift weapons passed through Imperial shields as if they didn't exist, materializing inside vital systems. Command centers exploded. Power cores went critical. Mighty fortresses that had withstood centuries of conventional warfare crumbled in minutes. Multiple strikes confirmed, Maya's tactical officer reported. Imperial forces are attempting to adapt their shields, but they can't block what they can't understand. Back on Kristallos Prime, High Marshal Vexthor received increasingly desperate reports from his commanders. Human ships were appearing inside supposedly secure facilities. Weapons were phasing through armor. Even their most advanced predictive AIs couldn't anticipate where the next strike would come. They hide their true capabilities, an Imperial scientist theorized, his appendages trembling. All those years of presenting themselves as newcomers to galactic society, it was deception. No, Vexthor corrected, finally understanding. It was strategy. They showed us what they wanted us to see while preparing for this moment. We believed our own propaganda about their inferiority. The phase shift fleet continued its advance, unstoppable and inexorable. Imperial ships found their own weapons useless against vessels that could simply shift out of normal space when threatened. The mighty Empire, which had dominated the galaxy through technological superiority, found itself facing an enemy that had transcended conventional warfare. Message from the human fleet, an Imperial communications officer announced, his crystalline form vibrating with fear. They say this is what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Maya received the reports of Imperial forces retreating across multiple sectors with grim satisfaction. The phase shift fleet's success had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. But this was just the beginning. Launch Phase 2 of Phantom Storm, she ordered. Target their manufacturing centers and shipyards. Let's see how the Empire fights when they can't replace their losses. The phase shift dreadnought split into smaller battle groups, each targeting critical Imperial infrastructure. Ships under construction in orbital docks were destroyed by weapons that ignored their protection. Supply lines were severed by raiders that couldn't be tracked or intercepted. The Empire built their defense doctrine on the assumption that their technology was superior, Maya explained to her officers. They never considered that we might develop something that operated on completely different principles. The Empire's response was predictable. They began evacuating their leadership to supposedly secret bunkers deep within their core worlds. But humanity had anticipated this too. Activate our deep cover agents, Maya commanded. Show them nowhere is safe. Across Imperial space, seemingly loyal servants, some of whom had been in place for decades, received their signals. The Empire's leadership would soon learn that their most trusted advisors had been human agents all along. The phase shift fleet continued its relentless advance, unstoppable and inevitable. The Empire, which had thought itself the master of warfare, was learning that they had never truly understood what war could be. High Marshal Vexthor, watching his empire crumble, finally understood the terrible truth. They hadn't just underestimated humanity's technology, they had underestimated their capacity for strategic thinking. The humans hadn't just prepared for war, they had spent decades setting up the perfect conditions for victory. The age of imperial dominance was ending, not with a glorious last stand, but with the slow realization that they had already lost before the first shot was fired. In the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, once the symbol of imperial might, chaos reigned. Representatives from 100 subjugated species watched in stunned silence as holographic displays showed the unthinkable, imperial fleets retreating on all fronts. High Chancellor Kvax, the Empire's supreme civilian leader, faced an audience that no longer cowered at his presence. His crystalline form, once radiating authority, now seemed brittle and aged. The humans must be stopped, he declared, his translator struggling to mask the desperation in his harmonic speech. They threaten the order we have maintained for millennia. But the chamber had changed. Where once there would have been immediate agreement, now there was contemplative silence. The sight of humanity's phase-shift fleet-crushing imperial defenses had awakened something long dormant in the galaxy's subjugated species, hope. Admiral Helena Reyes, now coordinating the combined human fleet from the EFS Nightshade, received the reports with grim satisfaction. Status of Operation Avalanche. Multiple species have declared independence from the Empire, her intelligence chief reported. The Arcturians have already pledged their fleet to our cause. The Centaurians are mobilizing their forces. Even the synthetic hexadrons are breaking their neutrality protocols. This had been part of the plan all along. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war, they had prepared to shatter the Empire's very foundation of power. On the industrial world of Nexus Prime, once the jewel of imperial manufacturing, the first riots began. The slave labor workforce, inspired by human successes, turned their tools into weapons. Imperial peacekeepers found their control slipping as centuries of oppression fueled an unstoppable tide of rebellion. The Empire made a crucial mistake, Helena explained to her staff. They built their dominion on fear and subjugation, never realizing that they were creating an army that would turn against them at the first sign of weakness. The phase shift fleet continued its advance, but now they were joined by ships of various designs and origins. Species that had been enemies under Imperial rule now fought side by side, united by the opportunity humanity had provided. In the Crystallos system itself, Imperial forces fought desperately to maintain control. But their rigid command structure, designed for maintaining order rather than adapting to chaos, proved fatally flawed. Human battle tactics, fluid and unpredictable, ran circles around their formations. Multiple Imperial commanders requesting terms of surrender, the communications officer reported. They say they would rather deal with humans than face the vengeance of their former subjects. Helena allowed herself a small smile. Send them our conditions. Any Imperial officer who orders their forces to stand down and provides intelligence on remaining Imperial strongholds will be granted amnesty. The offer sent shockwaves through the Imperial command structure. Centuries of absolute loyalty began to crumble as individual commanders chose survival over a dying ideology. On 1,000 worlds, the Empire's carefully maintained hierarchy collapsed. Species that had been deliberately kept divided and suspicious of each other found common cause in overthrowing their oppressors. The humans provided not just military support but something more valuable, proof that resistance was possible. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council, her comm officer announced. They're requesting Earth to send representatives. They want to negotiate the terms of a post-imperial galaxy. Helena studied the tactical displays, watching as more and more imperial systems turned from red to green. The empire that had stood for millennia was falling, not just to human military might, but to the very forces they had created through their own arrogance. Tell them Earth will be happy to participate in building a new galactic order, she replied. One based on cooperation rather than domination. The Empire's twilight had come, faster than anyone had predicted. But as Helena watched former Imperial subjects and humans working together to secure freed systems, she realized this wasn't just the end of something old, it was the beginning of something new. The galaxy was changing, and humanity, the species the Empire had dismissed as primitive, would help shape its future. 1 year after the Empire's fall, Earth's delegation entered the rebuilt Galactic Council chamber. The crystalline dome, once a symbol of imperial might, now sparkled with the flags of 100 liberated species. Admiral Helena Reyes, now serving as Earth's chief ambassador, led the delegation. The chamber bore little resemblance to its former imperial grandeur. Gone were the hierarchical tiers that had physically represented each species' status. Instead, a circular arrangement of seats emphasized equality among all members. Even the former imperial species, their pride humbled but their dignity intact, sat as equals. I remember standing in this chamber when we were considered barbarians, Helena remarked to Maya Rodriguez, now her chief diplomatic advisor. How quickly things change. The first session of the new Galactic Confederation was about to begin. Representatives from former imperial worlds mixed freely with delegates from the species that had helped overthrow their oppressors. The Arcturians' crystalline forms glittered next to the ethereal Centaurians, while the mechanical hexadrons hummed quietly in their designated spaces. Former High Chancellor Kvax, now serving as a simple representative of his species, approached Helena. His once imposing frame seemed smaller, but there was a new wisdom in his stance. "We thought we understood power," he said, his translator now set to a more natural tone. "We confused dominance with strength. Humanity taught us the difference." Helena nodded diplomatically. "Sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to show restraint." The chamber fell silent as the session began. The first order of business, ratifying the Galactic Concordat, a new framework for interstellar cooperation. Its first principle, proposed by Earth: no species would ever again be allowed to dominate another. As Helena presented Earth's vision for the future, she reflected on how differently things might have gone. The humans could have chosen vengeance, could have become the very thing they had fought against. Instead, they had chosen a harder path, building something new. "The stars belong to all of us," she declared to the assembled delegates. The Empire's greatest failure wasn't their cruelty, it was their inability to see the strength in diversity, in cooperation, in allowing each species to contribute their unique perspectives and abilities. The phase-shift fleet, once the symbol of humanity's military might, now served a different purpose. Its ships carried scientists, diplomats, and aid workers to worlds devastated by centuries of imperial rule. Human technology, no longer hidden, was shared freely with species working to rebuild. "We propose the establishment of the Galactic Scientific Coalition," Helena continued. "A shared database of knowledge, open to all member species. No more hoarding of technological advances. No more artificial restrictions on development." The vote was unanimous. Species that had once been mortal enemies under imperial rule now found themselves working together on joint projects. The Arcturians' expertise in crystal engineering combined with human phase-shift technology led to breakthroughs in sustainable energy production. The Hexadron's computational abilities, merged with Centaurian biological science, opened new frontiers in medical research. As the session concluded, Maya handed Helena a report. The last Imperial holdouts, a group of die-hard military commanders, had finally surrendered. Not to human forces, but to a joint peacekeeping fleet crewed by 7 different species. "Sometimes I wonder if the Empire realized what they were creating," Maya mused. Every species they oppressed, every culture they tried to crush, they were forging the very alliance that would eventually replace them. Helena watched as the delegates mingled freely, former enemies engaged in animated discussions about joint ventures and shared discoveries. The phase-shift dreadnoughts that had once struck terror into imperial hearts now served as mobile research stations and diplomatic venues. "The Empire thought war was about destruction," Helena replied. "They never understood that true victory lies in what you build from the ashes." As the newly ratified Galactic Confederation took its first steps, humanity found itself in an unexpected role, not conquerors, not avengers, but architects of a new galactic order. The stars above Crystallos Prime shone down on a galaxy forever changed, where cooperation had replaced domination, and where every species could reach for the stars not in fear, but in hope. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and it was brighter than anyone could have imagined.